Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming in this evening. It's a great pleasure to welcome Vicente Guallart back to the AA. Someone I think you all will know. He's been with us as an external examiner the last 2 or 3 years. He will be back with us again this summer to look at the work at the end of year. He's here tonight for a talk titled GeoLogics, as you can see, and the title, as you can also see, coincides with that of a new book that's just been published by the Actar publishing house in Barcelona, one that you all know well. It is, like many Actar projects, a great book. This one particularly interesting for not just cataloging Vicente's work, but also demonstrating something of the incredible range of how he works, the kind of activities that he does as an architect. As he mentioned to me in a conversation earlier today, about half of this book, you will see, are projects that he invented before having things like clients or sites or consultants or any of that other stuff you normally think architects need to do projects. And I think there's an incredible lesson in that, and in a way, in many activities that Vicente does throughout Spain and around Europe and the world increasingly, he really does embody the model of the architect today as a kind of proactive aggregator of people, ambitions, money, projects, planning, and it really is shifting a model of what we think the modern architect has long been, as a sort of passive receiver of projects when they happen to fall through the door of the office. He works in the opposite way, and very much like a school like the AA is really interested in the way in which we all can connect people, bring people together for discussions and debates that then will evolve into things that we think of in the more familiar form as architectural projects, some of which I think you all know already very well. I think the master plan that he's an author of for Sociopolis, one of the projects in this book that he's been working on for many years, is an example of him really inventing an urban development project, finding a client, a city, a group of incredibly interesting international architects that will all eventually build the projects in it, and in fact develop a new model for urban development across Europe. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Vicente back, and tonight's event will be his presentation and lecture on the material in the book, on the way he catalogs its geologic and information. And then afterwards, please join us next door in the North Jury Room for a bit of wine and an opportunity to hold the book like this. Vicente, thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Brett, for the introduction and for the presentation. In the last years, I have been coming for the external review, and I had the opportunity to see or to critique the work students and the school itself is doing. And today, in fact, I am in the opposite position, because I am going to present my work, and I will be pleased to receive your critiques about it. In fact, today I have been thinking to publish a book is like, or to make the fusion of your ideas. I think it's a crucial part of being an architect. No? In the last year, I have been working with the Actar people and with some other people in many publications, because it's said that every person needs to create the environment where it works. No? This is explained very well to artists. Every artist needs to create the environment where it works. And in my case, I had the strange situation where in our local environment we had always many, well, it was Barcelona has been a place very much consolidated about some way of doing. And we thought that if one place wants to be leader, it needs to be reinventing always itself. And the crisis that we see today about the economy is, in fact, about this. It's about people that knew the industrial century was about doing things in a very repetitive way, trying to do as best as they could, but not being flexible enough in order to be reacting to the reality. No? And then this is something that is happening very clearly with companies, but it's happening also with cities. And then we architects, we are working in cities, we are building cities, we are interacting with cities, and then to create the good, let's say, environment, the good language for this interaction somehow is crucial. In fact, this book I have been working in the last 7 years. It was called before Media, Mountains, and Architecture. Akhtar announced during 7 years in the Frankfurt Book Fair. You can find in Amazon in second hand for the Media, Mountains, and Architecture. That is a book that never exists. And this is the upgrade version of that. So again, when you start your making projects, you never know when you should be publishing your work. And so that's, it has been like a long story, but finally I'm here. In fact, the structure of this book is very, very special. I remember talking with Jerzy Reiser. He published this book, yeah? Yeah, the Atlas. And he was discussing with someone in order to decide if this should be a theoretical book or it should be a book on projects. And then in his case, it's mostly about some theory with small illustrations. But in my case, I thought I should do both. I should mix both. I am a mixer man, and that's why I'm doing it this way. And the way I present my projects, in fact, came out from this diagram. This is from a project I did some years ago in the year 2003. I won a competition in Taiwan. In fact, I remember myself, it was the first international competition I won. I was doing this project, and in fact, I didn't know where was Taiwan. I didn't know that was an island, that it was a kind of illegal place because it's not recognized by United Nations as a country. Obviously, it's a great place with a great story. And the fact that I should make a project in a place that I don't know at all, a place where it has their own cultural environment, etc. The fact that the project was about New Taiwan by landscape, the fact that there were two harbors at the same time in that competition that I should develop, make me think about how we should think about the territory and how we should try to interact with that place. No? And in fact, that's one of the most important questions today, is to understand that architecture is not about putting something on the earth, but architecture, in fact, is about making the earth. You know? I read some days ago about someone say that the humans are not anymore biological persons, that we share some genes with some other people and with some other species, but we have become geological, let's say, activity, because we ourselves, with our activity, we change the climate. So we had actions, the same kind of actions that volcanoes did in the past of the history. You know? So the question is that we are becoming the builders of the planet, and then the planet is not just about buildings, but the planet is about everything, about the nature, about the climate, about the environment. In fact, in my book I say that architecture will be not necessary if we will be able to live naked in the middle of the nature, no? Living in caves. So we decide we want to do some kind of shelter, some kind of artificial structure in order to be able to control the climate, to make some limits to live in some place that has some specific conditions. No? So the fact that we should be thinking why we are making architecture, we are not just playing with Rhino or with scripting, we are not just part of some kind of capitalistic structure in order to do things. No? That this is something that I am very much interested in. No? That students of architects should know why they are architects, why they are doing what they are doing. They are not that because they see that other people are doing this and that's very cool, they are very famous people, or something like that. So we should do architecture and we should do cities because we want to live in some way. And this is another thing that we have forget many times. We think that cities are like this because they are like this. For example, now I'm very much interested about horses, and I am starting to breed horses. I decide we should be doing some other kind of species, and I want to contribute with the biodiversity in the world. And I don't understand why it's not allowed to arrive with a horse to my house, for example, in Barcelona. Why is not allowed to go to horse to a city? So we have created some kind of living environment that has some rules where by law you need to have a car parking in your house, but it's not allowed to have a horse. Even table. And we are a developed, intelligent people, so we create some rules that. So part of my job somehow is to break those rules. To part of this job, I was saying great before that we have a big problem. That is that we don't have good plans. We don't have good politicians. We don't have people that really have visions about what we should be doing. We have in front of us just managers of the reality. Politicians are thinking always on this 4-year time. They are not able to think about how this city should be in 25 years. This year we have the 150th anniversary of the master plan for Barcelona. He invented the word urbanism when he made the master plan of Barcelona, and he is still building the plan that he designed 150 years ago. So this idea, and he was one of the founders of the city for the industrial plan. So the question is, we are now in a new situation where internet and the digital network create some other paradigm about how we live, how we dialogue with other people around the world, how we think about nature, how we are changing the climate, the nature itself, and then the way we think we do architecture. I should repeat everything I say? Or maybe the microphone got excited.
Maybe the microphone. It's your leg. Can you turn it off?
Okay. So, okay. Anyhow, again, what I say is that the position of first of all, why we make architecture, and second, what are we doing as architects? For me, is a crucial question. I say, Brett, that 50% of the projects I will present you, I already invent the projects because no one asked me to do them. So the question is, no one asked me, why don't you make the most, when I was a kid, I heard this story that someone invented the electrical car. But the people that are in the petrol lobby, they kill him. Did you hear that story? So the question is, why we don't have electrical car right now here? And why now everyone is thinking, why don't we make electrical cars? It's very clear that we should be able to have them. But the machines of making an economy in some way make us to not invent things. So this is the same is happening with architecture and with cities. We don't have good people asking about having good ideas, having the invention, having innovation, try to think how we can do more intelligent buildings, more self-sufficient buildings, etc. No? So what I try to do is to try to put order on these ideas and to transform into a kind of methodology that could allow, let's say, to define some very global approach to architecture that can take account about this idea of reacting to the geographical conditions. And exactly this is what I did in the book. In Taiwan, in fact, in this diagram, what I did was to talk only about the physics of geography. In Taiwan, I tried to have also a multi-scalar approach, looking to the coast, relief, mountain, tree, rock, stone, mineral. That means from a big scale to a small scale. And what I thought is that architects, if we want to react in the right way to places, we should look to the geography. After that, we should look to the geometry of that geography. So that means we should be able to measure the geography, and depending how we measure it, then we will learn something from it. No? For example, here I took this text, How Long is the Coast of Britain by Benoit Mandelbrot, and I say, how long is the coast of Taiwan? And then I was trying to understand what means to make a harbor, because in fact what we are doing is manipulating the length of this coast. No? So the fact that the way we measure the reality will give us some information about it. And then what I thought is that based on this geography and the geometry, I could extract some logic about what is our subject. And finally, based on this logic, what I thought is I should propose some structure. And again, this structure is some physical structure or some relational structure, but I like to think about architecture more about the structure than about decoration. Now, architects, sometimes we just become some decorators of some other kind of realities, and I like to think about the structure of things. So that's why in the book, I understood another thing, that geography is a great word, because geography is about tracing the reality. We have some physical geography, but we have also some social geography. We have also some economical geography. So geography is about putting things on the territory and tracing it. And then we can think about the planet as an ecological environment, as some relational place, or as a place made of countries, for example. And we can think about regions as a physical thing or as a statistical thing. We can think about metropolis on some physical reality or about some historical reality. We can think about cities and about living conditions, looking about people, or we can think about material conditions. So that means that geography is talking about some things that we are going to react. And this geography, as I say, is about people, is about mountains, and is about economy. And all these things can be seen from the global scale to the very small scale. So that means that this stone is exactly a part of this planet. No? So the condition of multi-scalar about the geography and obviously about architecture is another crucial condition that we have today. So based on these geographies, and in fact based on the projects that I have been developing, what I decided was to extract some logics that should be defined in a very generic way. So that means that what I have done in this book is to try to define some logics that anyone could apply to their projects. In fact, there are some logic that some other people are also using, and some of them I think that are some new contributions. And the first part of the book, what I do is try to explain what are those logics with some keywords and some text and some diagrams. No? So the fact that I has been drawing in order to try to explain, for me also has been important. I discovered this book by Christopher Alexander, in fact, about he was talking about the patterns, and what he was trying to do more or less is something I have been trying to do, but what he was looking was the patterns of the reality that can, let's say, extract some specific and good conditions for architecture. In my case, they are not about reality, but they are about some other, let's say, strategies for operation on the architecture. In what I say here is about, I define in 4 categories: environments, reactions, networks, and protocols. And all of them are not only about, I see this Porsche in the house, or I like this street, but are about some other kind of abstract process. So that means that I define this kind of logics. And in the other hand, when we talk about the projects, what I do is to every project I explain which logics we are using for them. So it's, again, a book that can be seen in many ways. What I like very much, the most interesting project for sure are those that you could explain with more logics, because that means that you have many layers of information in the top of them. And what I do in every project is taking some of these abstract logic. I try to explain the geography, the geometry, logic, and structure that are behind of that. For example, this is, you will see later the project, but this is one moment for one of how we were able to develop one surface of one of the buildings is here, and this is based on, and that's a completely true story. That's a completely true story. I didn't know how to solve one landscape project I was doing, and I found this stone that is a magic stone, and for me it's a magic stone, and I have the impression that if I lose the stone, I will lose the project forever. So I have shown this stone in many museums around the world. But I discovered I should be measuring the stone, and I should measure even some microscopic view of the stone. And based on that, I was able to develop some strategy about the geometry I should be doing. So today is the first presentation of this book. And so it's the first time I explain this in that way. And so what I thought is that what I would like to do is to talk more about the logics than not to talk about the project. So that means what I'm going to do is to show some of the logics, to show some of these diagrams, and then to show some of the results in order to understand what we are planning. Because today, I think, again, is a moment to define some new approach on how to interact with the world. In fact, what I would like to do first is to show one video we did for an exhibition in Valencia, because it was a foundational moment that we tried to explain how the world, how architecture operates, what we are doing when we do a project. That is exactly this. No? This is a video that explains the foundation of a city, and what we did was, based on an environment, we defined some nodes, and based on these nodes that you see there are letters, one are vowels, another are consonants. Ones are buildings with housing, and the others are facilities or working places. And we give some rules in order to say what happened with people meet each other, and they know each other, and then they start to go to visit each other to another place. And then this could be, this could be the whole planet. This could be the idea of how the physical world is organized based on some specific condition of places, and how, based on the rules of the interactions between things, we create these. Then the networking of the territory is happening. In fact, this is a 24-hour process where the people have different ages, That's why there are different colors, etc. You can find this video also in internet, in YouTube. So that means that this idea of geography is about foundation of places. I like very much to think that we are now in a process of refoundation, in fact, of the planet, because of this question I said before, but the cities are not able to grow anymore to anywhere. So maybe they should grow to inside, or some new cities should be found in other places, like in Mongolia or in Arabia. So we are in an interesting process when we thought it was impossible to create new cities, and there are people today that are building new cities from scratch. So that gives us another great opportunity. In this diagram, what we are talking about, the idea of that the city during the whole history of urbanization has growth on the nature, and now maybe the nature should grow to the city. We did in this project, in this HiperCatalonia project, based on studying how fast the development of the third grid happened in Barcelona, we calculate when the whole Catalonia will be completely built. And depending on the speed of development, maybe in the year 2375, the whole Catalonia will be completely built. So I think that to have this kind of time vision on the reality is, again, crucial, because now we are able to understand 200 years is, in fact, very few time in the history of humanity. And today, Obama was talking about that Lincoln was born, I think, or 200 years ago. So that's incredible short time. But if we think Lincoln, we think about the dinosaurs, no? Something very, very, very old. So that means that following some kind of rules, in these 200 years or 300 years, the whole Catalonia, or maybe the whole island of England will be built. And this is something right now, today, we should start to think. How we want to grow, how we want to live, and how we are using the territory. So we work in some of these ideas of making the cities grow to inside, trying to bring nature to the cities, try maybe to make some artificial islands. So try to make an island is, again, a foundational process. So I like the idea of making foundational process in the territory. This is another, so the first logics are kind of urban or territorial questions. And this one, right now, I have a project in Tehran. Again, it was a place that I will never expect to be working over there. And this is a project that we invent because I was invited there by some young architects. They make me a tour. We were discussing, and someone explained me, so Tehran is found here, no? In the Silk Road. And in fact, they have a city that grows from 3 to 13 million people. And what happened is they grow against, again, another mountain, the Alborz mountain, that is here, that they say that is the mother of the Persian culture. And they have a city like this that grows so much, and they say, Mr. Guallart, well, what we could do here, no? And then I developed the concept of making the 7 gates to Alborz. I say that they should make, instead to make a red line here saying it's forbidden to go beyond, what they should do is to define a dynamic relation between the city and the mountain. And this must be defined not by forbidding things, but by activating things. So I say that because they have these rivers over here, they have these green areas, they should do some kind of buildings, but also some places that should make some dynamic relations between these. No? And then the idea was, why not to make some kind of building that could be bridges and gates that make this relation between the city and the mountains. And in fact, we already, it's incredible, but it was not about an architectural project because the architect didn't know, the client didn't know what he wanted. And the crucial moment was not to design a form, but it was to define a concept. 7 gates to Albus, and they say, it's incredible, let's do them. But we're not talking about any project at all. We're talking about a concept, how to define this relation and why they should make a gate between the city and the mountain. No? And so this is exactly the project that we are working right now. And they told me, Mr. Guallart, you have like 3 months to make the design. The construction will start in 2 months. So they want to start the construction before to have even the design. So again, architecture somehow is like irrelevant. The important thing is like the reaction, the action, the vision to share, process, etc. No? So we define here a park, and we define this kind of building that will be also a mirador to look to the city. And in fact, I was here this week, and they have snow over there. So it's a very intriguing place. Well, this is Denia Mountain project. That this is a project that has been working many times. And again, this project is not developed because they change the mayor every 2 years. Because there is it's minority, and then they change mayor every. So they have here this place. Denia, for example, they have a currency in the 11th century when it was Arab. So it was one of the capitals of the Mediterranean Sea, and now it's a place that has become completely irrelevant in the territory. So many times the people are talking about sustainability, and they are talking about planting trees, but they should remember that sustainability is about environment, about economy, and about social. So you can plant a lot of trees in one city, but you can destroy the city because you are not able to make it dynamic from the economical point of view. And what happened here, there was a mayor that has the vision that we should be doing something here in this mountain that you see there is a quarry, and he say, we want to put many activities in the center of the city. So we were sharing a vision about that city should grow to inside, and the most interesting and dynamic activities in the city should be put in the inside and should not go to the periphery, that this could be more another approach to what to do with the territory. No? So in this diagram, in this process, based on the idea of growing to inside, of renaturalization of the territory, what we are planning is that, again, to do a geographical action exactly in the place where this city was found. You will see later, because this is the result, in fact, of what we did in this query, but you will see later in another layer of this process. No? So the urbanizing process, in fact, I discovered that Christopher Alexander was talking also about this, about growing, putting the nature, and making the rural interacting with the city. The interesting thing about Christopher Alexander is that all these people that are the followers that are somewhere in the Middle West in America, what they are doing is to make formulas about defining from a mathematical point of view how good is this place. No? Those people, I don't remember the name, is a Greek guy. They arrived to this place, and he said, this square is 72.2. So they are able to, following some mathematical rules with these 400 approaches of Christopher Alexander, they are able to say the number that is appropriate for that. We are working in that direction too. So this is the Sociopolis project that I will explain you later. But this project, in fact, was an invention that I proposed. I proposed first to the city of Barcelona, why don't we invite some architects and we do what Mies did in the past. He invented some friends, and they did a neighborhood together in the 27 in the Waisenhof in Stuttgart. And in Barcelona say, no, we know what to do. We have Frank Gehry, and we know how to deal with the cities. And what happened, Valencia, I was born in Valencia, but they have Calatrava, so they have some other kind of doing big things, no? They don't know what to do because they have like 10 Calatravas, one beside to the other. And now they don't know why they have so many. But in any case, the interesting thing about my project is that no one was taking care about social housing. And I say, social housing in fact doesn't care, but why don't we invite some architects and let's do a neighborhood of social housing? Yeah, they say, okay, you can go to the south. It's the worst place. We have agriculture over there, and maybe you can try to do something over there. The question is, they were thinking that ecologists will kill me because we should be building in the orchard in the agriculture. No? So the reality is that I will show you later. This project is under construction. What we did was, instead to destroy all the agriculture, we are doing the first master plan in Spain that we are keeping like 50% of the existing agriculture inside the city. No? So we'll keep agriculture inside. It's a first approach for arriving to your house in horse, but for the moment it's not allowed. It's not allowed yet. But the interesting thing is that this was a proposal that I did to someone. Obviously, there were some politics and some people from art environment that were supporting very much. But this generates a volume of business of 300 million euros. No? All the investment there will be. The good things is that some years ago, well, last year there were some demonstration in Valencia saying we don't make more Calatrava, we want social housing, no? And because the people want some houses with the right price to live, no? And this is the kind of project. The good things is that we were thinking with sometimes in advance about what the city will need, and that's why I will show you some pictures. This is about under construction. Well, another important thing is about how we learn from the landscape in order to make architecture, and not how to learn from the landscape in order to do another landscape. Learning from the landscape and learning, this is, for example, how the Romans were measuring the territory, how they were planting olive trees in Jaén. And they were doing something that, in fact, is what we are doing with some of the software that we are using right now. And this, I remember one trip in Spain. I did 1,000 kilometers in Spain, and incredible thing is that I saw at least like 50 incredible landscapes, but I didn't see any good building in 1,000 kilometers, you know? So what I decided is I should copy the landscape in order to make architecture and not copy architecture in order to make architecture, because we should copy what is more beautiful in order, or we should learn from some. So this kind of very rational approach to understand the territory that makes like hundreds of kilometers is something that I am very interested about that. And then we did some kind of, for an exhibition in Barcelona, some kind of radical visions about this is today a chemical environment in front of the Mediterranean in Barcelona, and we propose to remove it and then to bring back agriculture and then start to work with some self-sufficient buildings. We move to reactions. And about reactions, again, we are back in Denia. And in Denia, what I learned is that we have a hole here. So this is the Denia mountain. The Romans found the city here. The Arabs did a castle here, and this was military. The Christians killed the Arabs, and then they did the city here. But then there came another Christians that killed the other Christians, and then they destroyed the castle. And then there came some other Christians, and they decide to destroy the castle. And then they make agriculture here, and they make a quarry here in order to build the harbor, as you saw before. So, like, this is a small place in the territory, but it has an incredible know-how. I like very much the idea of that the know-how of the territory. We know that the companies have know-how, but the territory has know-how. And then architecture is about adding other layers to the know-how. You understand? So the difference between me and a bacteria is that the bacteria that I was had many mutations. And every time I had a mutation, I keep information in the past. And then we have more complexity and more information. It's about being able to have mutation but keeping some information from the past. And then when we talk about tabula rasa, we are thinking about going to one place, agriculture, forest, or whatever, destroying and making a city. What I am doing, what we are trying to do, is to try to build in one place in order to add one layer, but then to keep big part of the history of that place in the project. And this is what we did here. So we say, if all these guys were killing between each other and they were building here, we should not consider this as just heritage, but we should consider this as an alive place. And then the best way to protect the heritage is to enlarge it. So we should do more heritage, more good things, in order that in the future the people will look to us and say, oh yeah, there were people during many centuries, and even in the 21st century there were people doing interesting things. So the question here was, the mayor said, Mr. Guallart, I heard that you are expert. He saw some of these images. I heard you are expert in making mountains. Could you make a mountain for me? You know, I mean, it was an incredible phone call that I received one day. I remember in January 2003 or something like this. And then the question said, okay, now it should be not just a drawing. We should develop some science out of that. And then, again, based on this idea of making things growing from inside, working in a structural way, what I thought is we should make the mountain to rebuild itself. We should not put a building in that hole, but we should make like some of these animals that when you cut the arm, they rebuild the arm. So the rock should have some rules on that. They should be able to grow from inside and then learn from their own history or from its own knowledge. That's where I discovered this stone. I will show you later another layer of this project. But one incredible thing is that the site was three-dimensional. So this is my site. The site was 150 meters long, but it has a building, a volume. So my idea was we should rebuild the mountain. Instead to make a building, our limit is the original mountain, and then we should find the rule of how to do that. And then we did some geological studies that we see later, and then we were able to develop some strategy of how to put some activities here, but also how to generate all these surface. And in fact, it's about the idea of this micro-topography. So this project, we were analyzing this project from many scales, from the landscape or whatever. And then again, I remember Mandelbrot. And then Mandelbrot said about this multi-scalar strategy. And he said that the branch is the same as the tree. And I say, well, if Mandelbrot is true, the rock should be the same as the mountain. And then I discovered this magic rock in that place. And what we did was to took another one. We didn't destroy that one. And we did another scale of the Mandelbrot process. And then we were studying this in microscopic scale. And then I discovered this rhomboedric structure inside the limestone. And based on this macroscopic structure, we start to work with hexagons, and we start to work with this geometry based on these triangles. And then we develop this piece that is able to connect to each other, and then we can generate this kind of surface. That this is exactly this. We decided also to have 3 scales of this same piece, and that's why we were able to generate all these surface. So we did this in the year 2003, where scripting in fact didn't exist, or 2002, and all of this was based on this multi-scalar strategy and about to try to make things growing from inside. Arborescence is another clear process. Mandelbrot and other people were talking about that. And we are working now in many times in this idea of making arborescence structure. In that case, maybe it was too literal, but we should transform in something that could be literal into some geometry that should produce a building. And we use this idea for the Spanish pavilion for Shanghai the Expo that got a third award. But we wanted, in fact, and we are working in this idea of Gaudí work and also on that, of making this structure and having everything inside, having all the air, all the fluids for the building inside this structure, and then we could be generating some functions and some activity on that. The Egyptians also in Egypt, they were doing this kind of things like 4,000 years ago. And we were doing, the book also I show many times how we use advanced technologies in order to be able to produce this kind of natural approach to building in the territory. And here we were doing one model in scale 1 to 5. That was another incredible moment in my history of working, because we were designing a harbor that, in fact, I was 3 days ago in Taiwan because we started the construction of the harbor. And the idea is that we didn't know how to design this building. We were doing buildings that look like buildings, and I thought we should do something new because the climate here is so strong that we should have another approach of how to make a building there. And then I discovered another stone. This is in the diagram. And we thought, oh, it's very nice, this stone. But we did this microscopic section again. And we discovered that there is a very rational geometry behind that. There are always circles with these 100, making these kind of triangles 180 degrees. Because what happened is, this is a process where inside a volcano, the matter is trying to solidify, but the air is trying to go outside. And by this relation, the nature generates this geometry, because you have spheres of air and the matter is trying to solidify with the best form. And then what we decide is that we should make some kind of roof where what we should provoke is to increase the speed of the air in order to have a better natural condition without using machines for that. So that's the section of the building we decided we should do, and this is the plan. So we decided we should do a structure based on umbrellas like that, and based on that we should generate the market that we should design. And now that's more recently, we have been using this software like Ecotech or some others, where we discovered that, in fact, before the form, the modern say that the form follows function. But now we should say that forms follow energy. I mean, the beauty of buildings should be in buildings that are, I mean, Le Corbusier was talking about la machine d'habiter, no? The machine of living. And then that's why they were saying, oh, we have air conditioning, we can make artificial ventilation. But now we are exactly a century, 100 years later, we should say we want to do some other machines, but those should be some natural machines. We should learn from how the nature works, and then we should learn about how to activate the nature by making architecture that is part of this nature. And that's why we make this kind of chimneys, these kind of buildings that in fact will improve like 8 degrees. The temperature will be lower just because of the form of the building that they accelerate the air. That's another concept, the idea of accumulating, no? The idea of, I mean, buildings and city has been since Romans about making boxes on top of the others, because the cities were rectangular, and then they decided instead to be one floor, like at the beginning in Greece, to be one at the top of the other. And until now, we were thinking that this should generate the boxes. But it doesn't make sense to make boxes because there are some regulations about the volume and the projections or whatever. So the form of the building should base in some other kind of arguments, maybe. Accumulation can be obviously a good strategy, but then we should think about how new accumulation should be based should be developed in order to do some other kind of buildings, no? And then again, we did this project for the expo in Wrocław. That in fact we won the competition, but they didn't win the competition. So the Expo 2012 will be in Jeosu in Korea and will not be in Poland. But we, based on this idea of accumulating, we're thinking how to do a building that instead to be tall, the building is fat. No? So it's another typology of buildings that are big buildings that have big holes, that the form here is following the sun in order to see which sides are better to catch the sun. And then again, we were doing models in our institute. We were doing models trying to make the building, not trying to follow the same process that we'll use to make the building. Measuring is another great process. So this is one of my favorite, let's say, strategies, because the idea that by measuring one place and by putting some nodes in the territory, we transform. So that's Fuji Harbor. That is the other project I showed you before. We say, okay, we put 6 meters and we do some parallel lines. Okay, that's show us how is the building, where is bigger, where is the distance, the bigger distance to the sea. But if we put some nodes of activities here and some circulations, that means if we put some humans on top of abstraction, then our pattern becomes a living pattern. So this pattern becomes more intelligent, becomes an interaction of this pattern. And if we were able to change this, then this will be different based on that. So that means that we take one place, we measure it, we put some activation, and then this activation could be the same video that you saw before, and then we generate the structure. In this case, the structure is the floor, and based on that, we could do whatever we want, and this is what we did here. So instead to make a building with lines, we put this building with the umbrellas and with this natural ventilation. This is 3 days ago with the opening ceremony, the first stone ceremony. That those guys are really great. They put some food for the soul of everything on the side. It's very nice that, for example, I don't know here, but in Spain, when you have the first stone ceremony, there is only the mayor doing this and that's all. But here they have like 15 people. Now they have everyone that is moving around is invited to be part. And that's great, because then it's really a very social act. No, it's not about everyone looking to the mayor, but it's the mayor, the fisherman, the vice mayor, the someone, even the architect is invited to these ceremonies. No? Resolution is another key question, and resolution many times is about money. You can do, or maybe not, or maybe the future is about machines that are able to work with whatever resolution, but maybe the money is connected more with the assemblage than not with the production of the thing. But this is a house that sometimes I don't show, and sometimes I show it, because in fact it's a house of very low resolution. No? It could be much more high resolution, but then it could be some other thing. But in this case, I like to try to learn about this and to try to put myself looking to the sea with this very low resolution, but with this very huge cantilever. Well, you are the masters of parametrics, so what can I say about parametrics? But we were in the project we did also in Taiwan. We thought, I was in Taiwan and in Japan, and I liked the Zen gardens, and I thought I like how those guys were looking. They have also magic stones, so it's not only me that I think that there are magic stones. The Japanese also thinks that there are some magic stones, and they look to the form of dragon and things like that. It's a very old tradition. And I found, so that's interesting because it looks like a Zen garden, but it's just a volcanic explosion. And then these rocks arrive here because the volcano was sending them like 200 meters away or something like that. But we decide to reproduce or to try to learn about the geometry of these stones. And so we were measuring, look at this incredible relation. I mean, the nature worked better than us. And then in this case, I was working with Marta Malé. Marta is professor right now here, and she's a great person and a great architect. And she told me, well, these rocks could be done with based on a cube that you have one point here. So this, what is great, is about to be very simple and based on simple things to generate some kind of complexity, you know? And then we were working on the idea of making a Zen garden between the Taiwanese thing and the Japanese thing, and we decided to make this out of wood, no? Instead to make of, to have the rocks on the top of other rocks. So we did this with wood in front of the beach, no? That's, the project was for Taiwan, but in fact we built in Spain right now. We built in Spain. And in fact, it was not literal because what I tried to do, I mean, something, that's not a joke. I will never use some geometry coming from limestone in a place that is volcanic. I will never do that. No, that's completely true because then maybe I will receive some email saying, what are you doing, no? That's a joke. You know, we are limestone, we are not volcanic. And then, and then what we did here was based on, let's say, the same thing. I will show you later what we did. So in the book is well explained because the pattern, we took the same idea, but not the same geometry. We are serious guys, and then we took it, we take this very seriously. No? Another parametric project, and this is, again, based on the same concept in Fuji, but we somehow, let's say we improve it because what we wanted was to use only one umbrella, and based on this umbrella, being able to make a structure, somewhat like mushrooms and somewhere like the opposite. No? And again, we decided to do this with using laser cutter, as you saw the other three. So the only piece, we have one piece like this, that is like this, and then we have maybe like, let's say, 4,000 different pieces with different form. But this structure that is now under construction, in fact, only has one piece, that is this one. And based on something, I like also that this is a very thin metallic thing, but by folding it and connecting another one, what we are doing is a tube structure. And this tube structure is able to handle whatever you want. So we are building tubes, and then we are doing these parametric structures. This is the same as this, has the same amount of pieces. But by doing this, we could do some huge thing. That's another incredible thing. This project, in fact, is a pity because I think that's about history again. We have this sea promenade in front of in Vinaroz, and then we are removing the traffic, and we want to do this pedestrian. And what happened is, what we measure was this, is how streets are arriving there, how the form of the coast is, how we are thinking the people will moving through. And then we developed one else system in order to generate a pattern that in fact was applied to this. I have a video that I will not show today, how instead to have squares like the traditional pixels, we have a small deformated square. And based on that, we did this pattern that we applied to the whole promenade. And based on that, in fact, we transform it, and we make all of these pedestrians. But in fact, and then that's why, but the interesting thing, and that's why what I say is these rocks are based on this pattern and not in the volcanic one. But the interesting thing is that based on this pattern coming from the L systems, from Stephen Wolfram, what we did was to produce everything, to produce the furniture and to produce also the lighting system that is following all this geometry. So the lighting system, again, was produced with laser cutter. The furniture here, you don't see only here two seats, but we did like 12 different seats, and I wanted to do all of them different, but finally we did only 12. But we were using this idea of parametric production in order to produce diversity on the place. And also about this, there is some cover that should be happening here. But so what is, for me, what is important is that with this pattern, we are keeping the history of the place on site. So what we are doing is what one small element did have some mutation. You keep some story there, and based on that, you produce things. And in the future, someone will come and will do some other thing on the top of that. Well, that's another building that is based about the reaction with the environment and how the lights arrive. This is again in front of the Mediterranean Sea, 2 apartment buildings that we built. Again, that's another thing based on the coast, and this is about trying to interact with the place, and we were following again the idea of measuring. Measuring literally creates some system to develop some kind of wooden platforms in order to create some landscape, in order to be able to live over there, reacting to these. Again, more reaction. We're working with glass for an exhibition we did in Avignon some years ago. And then, in fact, this is the Sociopolis project. The idea of, again, scanning the thing, learning from the most interesting network that you have. In the Sociopolis site, we had here a highway, and in a traditional approach of how to develop the neighborhood here, we should be thinking how to make a grid with cars, or in more old system, we should have someone saying we should make an axis here that goes from north to south, and make a square, and everything will be a great order over there. But we discovered that the most interesting thing that was happening here was all this water structure that was making agriculture possible. And this water structure, again, was made by the Arabs 1,000 years ago, and that's why agriculture is in that place. And then we choose, because we wanted to keep agriculture inside the city, we decide that we should keep all the water structure inside. And that's why we invented many things. Now we are, in fact, inventing an association in order to manage the agriculture field in the middle of that place. So the project is now, as you see, under construction. We did this perimetrical street, and all of this is about these water channels that are here. So all this will be agriculture in the middle of the city. So there are still many things to show and many ideas to show. I just to pass, some of them are connected to some others, some of them are also repeated. This is Sociopolis again, the model, and we are working on this idea of humanizing, well, humanizing is important because, in fact, these guys in Taiwan, they have a highway crossing through the middle of the city. This is something we had in many European cities 40 years ago, and Jane Jacobs was able to stop the highways passing the 5th Avenue in New York City. But here they didn't have any Jane Jacobs, and then they have a highway crossing the center, and that's why someone decided that we should make some public space. When we were here, it was very interesting because we say, Could you tell us where are the public buildings, the public facilities in the center of the city, Kilum? And they say, public facilities? What do you mean with public facilities? Well, where the people are meeting each other. And they say, oh, McDonald's, you mean? And we say, no, it's about generating public meeting places. So this is what we did. We are building a big platform on the sea in order to generate a public space here. And in fact, this week I was over there, and we are making here a bridge. The bad news is that the highway will be still here for many years. I say they should make another highway around, so they should move from here. Obviously, that it will take longer, but we are trying to bring the people back to the city and to make the city, let's say, for the people. Icons, you know a lot about icons. I want to finish my lecture, in fact, with my presentation. This is Sociopolis again, and this is another idea of discontinuity. You know, in the Stan Allen gave a lecture some days ago in my institute. He was here also, I think. And he said something about the continuity is over. We're thinking that fluidity will be everything, but he said that it demonstrates that you cannot have a kind of amorph space where activities can happen wherever. And we were working this idea of discontinuity many time ago, because in order to connect things, you need to break the reality in small parts. That this is what they were doing when they were studying about the DNA, working on human genes. But now in this project, this is exactly what we did. Instead to make 4 floors, we did 24 floors or 24 levels. We wanted to generate continuity, and in order to generate continuity, you can do it based on discontinuity. And this is why we make a building with different levels. And in fact, we make this building in Korea, in the Pachuduk city, that I think you know about him, about the project. The idea of the multi-scalar, again, is something crucial. We did sometimes some prototypes, scale. Well, sometimes ago also I was talking about the sharing tower, how to bring the concept of internet of sharing things to the physical space, and how to develop projects with sharing spaces. But in order to finish, I would like to talk, talk about my next book. I want to talk about what we are planning right now. That is, we are trying to think about a new way to let's say, to think about how we should inhabit this. No? Cerda wrote this book about the general theory about urbanization of the city, because before him and before the walls of the city were pulled down, the city was produced by making a building, making whatever, so there was not a rational system. And urbanism is about making rational the way we are in the territory. But this process, in general, was about destroying nature and then making some artificial grids in order to be there. So the general theory about urbanization, in fact, was only talk about cities and about the scale of the cities. And we have been working in the last 3 years about looking for a general theory that could explain how we are designing one room or how we are designing the whole planet. So a system that could allow to understand why the cities are how they are, what is happening in some other scales, and how the functions are connected between each other. And in fact, this is what we did in this diagram. In fact, we were trying to make a system that has compatibility with internet. And this idea that we are also working, that is the Internet of Things, that means that we should think how the model of internet can be applied to the physical world. And that's why what we were thinking is what is a network. And in fact, a network is something that has some nodes. But in fact, in order to have a network, you need to have the connection of this network. If not, nodes that are isolated are not networks, no? And in fact, well, those are nodes. We could have and the third thing that we have is an environment. So a network of something can happen if you have a medium where you transmit these things. So we have basically nodes, we have the connections, and we have the environments. And obviously we have protocols trying to say what this is talking to this other. No? So if we think about the physical world, we could think about the planet as the environment, and that's the history of urbanization. People that were creating small settlements here, and they start to walk between each other, and then start to create these kind of things, not these kind. So we could try to study the territory about, or the world, the planet, about the relation of something that is nature, something that is artificial, that in fact this artificial thing could be cities, buildings, rooms, objects, anything that we do are nodes that could be talking to each other. That means this table could be talking to this computer for the moment they are not, but this computer or this table could be talking to the tree over there, or could be talking to the city, or my shoes could be talking to the city, etc. And obviously we need networks in order to do that. So this general theory about the multi-scalar system of generating, thinking about how we can put, how we can make these nodes and these links of different scales, basically is explained in this graphic. Because, well, I will show you right now, not dynamic, and later dynamic, what we did in this graphic is we put here all the functions we could have in the world. In fact, if you think about the master plan of London, I don't know how many numbers you have in order to qualify the land. In Barcelona, we have only 20 numbers. With 20 numbers, we say what is going to happen in every place, what is really incredible. And one of the numbers is for cemeteries, that there are very few, no? And another is for military, but we say housing, offices, or whatever, no? The people that are, Salvador Rueda, that is an urban ecologist, he took all the functions from the tax department, and he discovered that there are 2,000 categories of activities that are paying tax. So that means that instead to have 20 numbers to say about what is happening in the city, you could have 2,000 numbers. In fact, here we divide these 2,000 numbers in 21 categories. Some of them are housing, some of them are working places, some of them are facilities, and some of them are infrastructure. And what we did was to try to see what it means in all these scales, 1, 10, 100, until 10 billion. 10 billion, in fact, is the whole planet, and this is my house. Okay? So what we discover in this research is that, in fact, and that's why I'm going now to jump to this application, because we did software in order to talk about this. So that means that we have here housing. Let me see. There are what we did. Let me see. You have objects here. Okay. So we have, for example, you know that a fridge only exists because you have a logistic platform that is taking cold aliments, cold food, and is somewhere here in London. We have Merca Barcelona, that this is our fridge in the scale 1 million. That means that we have a huge fridge that is sending things maybe to a supermarket, that is a smaller fridge that is sending things to our fridge. That means that our fridge is in scale 1 exactly the same thing that are one of these big logistic platforms in the scale 1 million. We could say the same about, let's say, one toilet. We only have toilets because, well, this is about energy. The traditional system about energy is that we have power because we have a nuclear plant, and that's the 20th century. Because in the 19th century, when they started with at the beginning of the 20th century, they were doing electricity local. But now, electricity is doing in the big scale and is going in that direction. So that means that all the cities that we know we are using right now, here we have infrastructure, but if we see, let me see, if we have here a book, somewhere we have a book, and then we have in the top the Library of Congress. Or we have here, okay, yeah, I was talking with the Minister of Housing of Spain. I say, we have all of us a crucifix at home. And then in the scale 1 billion, we have the Vatican. And she said, I don't have a crucifix at home. Anyhow, this idea of, and here we have a small local church. So that means, well, here we have a small music, playing piano. Here we have the Carnegie Hall or whatever. So that means that we could try to think about how work is working by trying to make the relations between these things. What we did was to try to make code lines. And in fact, code lines are the way things are happening. That means that if I want to have a tomato here in my fridge, I need to produce the tomato somewhere, and I need to send to my fridge. So the traditional industrial system is that somewhere in Brazil is making tomatoes, or in Morocco is sending with a boat to a huge platform, then to another small platform, then to a supermarket. Each of them is in one category, and finally is arriving to my fridge. And there are some ways, other ways. Okay, so that's a system that is some local producer is using some of these food market that now in New York City is very common, and we don't use any logistic platform. So there are the farmers that are coming to the city, making some activities here, and they are selling the tomato to my fridge. Or in the limit, I have, I don't know what is the code line, but I could have an urban orchard, as we have in Sociopolis, and I could be producing the tomato here in the scale 1 and sending directly to my fridge. So architecture and urbanism is about this. If we are able to reprogram the world by deciding where is producing what in order to have a better, let's say, system, a better economy, then we will have new arguments in order to make architecture and cities in different ways. If someone decide that tomatoes are produced in Morocco, we don't need to have urban orchards in front of our city. And that is not an urbanistic question. But if someone decides that every neighborhood should have urban orchards or should have fab labs in order that everyone produce their furniture in their building instead to produce in Sweden or whatever, then the rules about what are buildings and what are the program and how they should look like, how are cities, how is our living environment, then will change. And I think that finally this is previous to architecture, but we don't have, for the moment, good people that are thinking about this structural thing about how to work works. I think that this crisis that we have will be exactly about this. It will be about, I don't know, well, I can show you some in Venice. We were doing many of those code lines, and then we were making some connections between things. And if we decide, for example, that all the buildings must generate all the energy that is going to consume forever, then the buildings will be different, will be completely different. And then this is where architecture happened. This is when invention happened before architecture, and then that's why we have good arguments in order to make our project. Thank you, Brett. Thank you for the Architectural Association. That's a very historical place. I think it's maybe the best school of architecture in the world, and for me, has been a pleasure to present my book, GeoLogics, here. Thank you.